First Contact's Folly. High Admiral Ixel of the Volruchian Science Fleet stood at the observation deck of the flagship Eternal Knowledge, their iridescent scales shifting from deep blue to violet. A sign of mild annoyance, the holographic display showed yet another inhabited world, one of thousands documented in their vast database of galactic civilizations. Another Class 3 species, Ixel announced to the assembled council of observers. Preliminary scans showed typical development patterns, unremarkable physical capabilities, and standard technological progression. Their secondary eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture of dismissal. Research Director Nix, whose crystalline exoskeleton sparkled under the ship's ambient lighting, stepped forward. With respect, High Admiral, there are some anomalies in the data that warrant closer inspection. The assembled council members shifted uncomfortably. Nix was known for their obsession with minute details, often delaying important missions over insignificant variables. The High Admiral's scales rippled with barely contained impatience. "Proceed," Ixel commanded, their voice carrying the harmonics of authority. The species, which calls themselves humans, shows remarkable adaptability across their planet's diverse environments. They've established settlements in conditions ranging from extreme cold to scorching heat, from sea level to high altitudes, all without significant biological modifications. Many species adapt, countered Council Member Rix, their tentacles weaving patterns of skepticism in the air. The draconids of Sector 7 inhabited 12 different climate zones before achieving spaceflight. Nix's crystalline surface flickered with patterns of persistence. Yes, but the draconids evolved specific subspecies for each zone over millions of years. These humans, they remain fundamentally unchanged. They simply create tools and modify their environment instead of waiting for evolution. The High Admiral's scales settled into a deep green of contemplation. Interesting, but hardly unprecedented. What else? Their information processing capabilities are unusual, Nix continued. Their neural networks are relatively simple compared to most Class 3 species, yet they demonstrate complex problem-solving abilities that shouldn't be possible with their brain structure. A quiet murmur rippled through the council chamber. Ixel raised their primary appendage for silence. Furthermore, Nix pressed on. Their social structures are simultaneously rigid and flexible in ways our models can't quite predict. They form strong hierarchies, but can completely reorganize them in response to challenges. They wage war against their own kind, but unite instantly against external threats. High Admiral Ixel's scales shifted to the pale yellow of decision. Your concerns are noted, Research Director. We will establish a small observation post on their moon. 3 research vessels should be sufficient for a comprehensive study. Council Members Rix, you will oversee the operation. Zrix's tentacles formed the pattern of acceptance, but Nix's crystalline surface pulsed with warning patterns. High Admiral, I recommend a more cautious approach. There's something about their psychological profile that... Enough, Ixel interrupted, their scales now showing bands of finality. We have catalogued thousands of emerging species. We have seen hundreds achieve spaceflight. We have guided dozens into the galactic community. Your concern for detail is admirable, Research Director, but we must maintain perspective. These humans are thoroughly average in every measurable way. The council chamber began to empty as members departed to their various duties. Nix remained, their crystalline surface showing deep pulses of concern. Average, Nix whispered to themselves, reviewing the data one more time. Average strength compared to Class 3 species. Average speed. Average sensory capabilities. Average technological development. Their surface flickered with intense patterns of thought. But why does every simulation show them surviving scenarios they shouldn't? Why do all our predictive models fail when applied to their behavior? In the observation window, the blue-green planet spun silently. To any advanced civilization, it appeared utterly unremarkable. Just another world housing just another species taking their first steps into space. No one in the council chamber that day realized they were looking at something unprecedented in the galaxy. a species that had turned being average at everything into their greatest strength. The research vessels departed the following day, their crew confident in their superior technology and understanding of the universe. They had studied thousands of species before. They had never failed in their assessments, but they had never encountered humans before. As the ships approached Earth's moon, Nick sent one final message to High Admiral Ixel. Remember, the most dangerous predators are often the ones that appear harmless until it's too late. The message was filed away, unread, in the High Admiral's communications buffer. After all, what could possibly go wrong with observing such an ordinary species? The Silent Rebellion. The first sign that something was wrong came 3 Earth months after the research outposts were established. Council member Zrix's tentacles writhed in patterns of frustration as they reviewed the latest reports from their lunar observation posts. "Impossible," they muttered, their voice resonating through their command chamber. "The humans couldn't have detected our quantum-shielded facilities." But the evidence was undeniable. Every time the research teams deployed their observation drones to gather data on human military installations, they found the facilities either completely abandoned or engaged in obvious training exercises, never anything of actual strategic value. Lieutenant Commander Vex, whose gelatinous form rippled with nervous energy, approached Zrix's command podium. "Sir, we've analyzed the pattern. The humans aren't detecting our drones directly. They're noticing secondary effects we hadn't considered." "Explain," Zrix demanded, their tentacles forming sharp angles of attention. "They're watching migratory birds, sir. Our quantum shields prevent detection of our drones, but the birds still avoid flying through the space our drones occupy. The humans noticed this pattern and began using it to track our movements." Zrix's tentacles froze in disbelief. "They're tracking our undetectable surveillance technology while watching birds." "Yes, sir, and that's not all. Remember those primitive radio telescopes we dismissed as harmless? They've been repurposed into a crude but effective detection network. The humans claim they're studying solar flares, but they're actually monitoring the minute gravitational distortions caused by our ship's drive systems." Back on the Eternal Knowledge, Research Director Nix received these reports with their crystalline surface pulsing in complex patterns of vindication and concern. They immediately requested an audience with High Admiral Ixel. "You see," Nix's surface flickered intensely as they presented the data. "This is exactly what I warned about. The humans aren't countering our technology directly. They're finding innovative ways to solve problems we didn't even know we had." High Admiral Ixel's scales had settled into a troubled gray. They shouldn't be capable of this level of adaptation. Their scientific understanding is centuries behind ours. "That's precisely what makes them dangerous," Nix insisted. "They don't need to understand how our technology works to figure out ways around it. They observe, they adapt, they overcome, and they do it faster than any species we've encountered." The situation deteriorated further when the research teams attempted to abduct human subjects for detailed study. The first few attempts succeeded, but then something unexpected happened. The humans didn't respond with panic or military force. Instead, they adapted. People began traveling in unpredictable patterns. Communities developed simple but effective warning systems. Children were taught to watch for subtle environmental changes that might indicate alien presence. None of these countermeasures should have been effective against Valruxian technology, but somehow, the humans kept slipping through their grasp. "They're learning," Lieutenant Commander Vex reported, their gelatinous form darkening with worry. "Every failed attempt teaches them more about our capabilities and limitations. They're turning our own research against us." The final straw came when the humans began launching what appeared to be communication satellites. The Valruxian observers dismissed them as primitive technology, until they realized the true purpose of the network. "They've created a detection grid," Zrix announced to the Council, their tentacles forming patterns of grudging respect. "Those aren't just communication satellites. Each one carries simple atmospheric monitoring equipment. Together, They can detect the minimal atmospheric displacement caused by our cloaked vessels entering Earth's atmosphere. High Admiral Ixel's scales shifted through a rainbow of colors before settling on the deep purple of decision. How? Their sensors shouldn't be sensitive enough. Individually, they're not. Nix explained, their crystalline surface pulsing with excitement. But they've networked thousands of simple sensors together, creating a detection system more sophisticated than anything we thought them capable of building. They're not trying to match our technology. They're finding elegant solutions using what they have. The council chamber erupted in debate. Some members argued for immediate withdrawal to preserve their technological secrets. Others advocated for a show of force to establish dominance. A few suggested opening diplomatic relations before the situation escalated further. But research director Nix noticed something that troubled them even more than the humans' technological adaptability. Look at their response pattern, they urged, displaying a holographic analysis. No panic, no chaos, no public announcements or military posturing. They're collectively pretending not to notice us while systematically closing off every advantage we have. This level of coordinated action without central direction should be impossible for a Class 3 species. As if to punctuate Nix's warning, a new report arrived from the lunar outposts. The humans had launched another set of weather satellites, but these ones carried simple electromagnetic pulse generators. Individually harmless, together they could disrupt Volruxian cloaking systems across an entire hemisphere. High Admiral Ixel stared at the holographic display of Earth, their scales shifting to colors that hadn't been seen in the council chamber for generations. Perhaps, they said slowly, we should reconsider our classification of this species. In the depths of space, humanity's silent rebellion against their unwanted observers continued, each simple innovation combining with others to create a web of protection that grew more sophisticated by the day. The humans hadn't fired a single shot or made a single threat, but somehow they were winning. Breaking points. The Grand Council chamber of the Eternal Knowledge had never seen such discord. The typically orderly proceedings had devolved into chaos as various factions argued over the escalating human situation. High Admiral Ixel's scales flickered between stress patterns as they attempted to maintain order. The humans have now disabled 60% of our observation capabilities. Senior observer Kelrix announced, their metallic exoskeleton vibrating with barely contained alarm. They're not just countering our technology. They're learning from it. Yesterday, we detected attempts to replicate our quantum shielding using what they call metamaterials. Primitive, yes, but the principles are sound. Research Director Nix's crystalline surface pulsed with urgent patterns. That's not the worst of it. Show them the cultural analysis, observer Kelrix. The holographic display shifted to show a cascade of human entertainment media. Movies, books, games, all showing humanity encountering and overcoming alien threats. They're not just preparing technologically, Kelrix continued. They're preparing psychologically. Every failed abduction, every detected probe, every glimpse of our ships feeds into their collective imagination. They're literally rehearsing scenarios for dealing with us through their entertainment. Preposterous, countered Council member Rix, their tentacles forming patterns of dismissal. You suggest we should fear their primitive fiction. Nix's surface flared. You still don't understand. Their fiction isn't just entertainment. It's a distributed problem-solving network. Millions of humans, constantly imagining and sharing different scenarios for dealing with advanced alien civilizations. They're crowdsourcing solutions to our very existence. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. High Admiral Ixel's scales shifted to deep crimson, a color of crisis. There's more, Lieutenant Commander Vex added, their gelatinous form rippling with nervous patterns. We've detected anomalies in human internet traffic. They're using our surveillance attempts as cover to test their own global defense systems. Every time we probe their networks, they learn more about protecting them. The display shifted again, showing a global map of Earth with countless points of light representing human activities. Look at their response pattern. Nick's urge. No central command. No single point of failure. Each human community is developing its own solutions, sharing what works, discarding what doesn't. They're evolving faster than we can study them. Impossible. Drix interrupted. No species can adapt this quickly without central coordination. That's exactly what makes them dangerous, Nix insisted. They don't need central coordination. They have something we've never seen before: distributed innovation. Every human is a potential source of new ideas, and their information networks let them share and improve on those ideas almost instantly. The Council's debate was interrupted by a priority alert. On Earth, humans had just accidentally tested an electromagnetic pulse weapon during a routine satellite maintenance operation. The pulse had temporarily disrupted 3 cloaked Volruchian vessels, forcing them to reveal themselves briefly over a major city. Instead of panic, the humans responded with a flurry of social media posts about atmospheric phenomena and aurora borealis. They were collectively maintaining plausible deniability while gathering data about Volruchian cloaking technology. They're playing with us, Kelrix realized, their exoskeleton resonating with disbelief. Every time we think we're studying them, they're actually studying us. High Admiral Ixel's scales had settled into a pattern that hadn't been seen in generations. Uncertainty. Perhaps, they said slowly, we should consider withdrawal before. The chamber's emergency systems suddenly activated. On Earth, something unprecedented was happening. Millions of humans had simultaneously pointed their primitive telescopes and radio receivers at specific points in space, points that exactly matched the quantum probability locations where Volrugian ships could safely exit the solar system. They've boxed us in, Nix announced, their crystalline surface pulsing with a mix of terror and admiration. They've figured out the mathematical constraints of our fold space drive technology. We can't leave without revealing ourselves, and they know it. The Council erupted into chaos. Some members demanded immediate military action to establish dominance. Others insisted on attempting diplomatic contact from a position of strength. A few suggested simply revealing themselves and accepting the consequences. But Research Director Nix noticed something even more troubling in the latest data. Human scientific publications had recently shown a suspicious interest in certain obscure fields: quantum entanglement, gravitational lensing, and electromagnetic field manipulation. Separately, these papers seemed innocuous. Together, they demonstrated that humans were rapidly reverse engineering fundamental principles of Volrugian technology. We're not losing our technological advantage, Nix realized, their surface flickering with the pattern of epiphany. We're accidentally giving them a shortcut to developing technologies that should be centuries beyond their reach. High Admiral Ixel's scales had finally settled into a color never before seen in the Council chamber: respect. How do we negotiate with a species that has turned our own observations against us? How do we establish diplomatic relations with a civilization that has weaponized its own perceived weakness? The answer came in an unexpected form. Across Earth, humans began broadcasting a simple mathematical sequence into space, not aimed at the Volruchian ships, but at their home world. The message was clear. They knew where the Volruchians came from, and they were ready to talk. But only as equals. The Grand Council chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. In trying to study humanity, they had inadvertently created something unprecedented. A species that had compressed centuries of technological and social development into mere months, driven by the mere suggestion of an alien threat. They had wanted to observe human behavior. Instead, they had become the catalyst for humanity's greatest leap forward. And this was just the beginning. Paradigm shift. The emergency meeting of the Volruchian High Council was unprecedented. For the first time in their history, it included non-military observers. Research Director Nix stood before the assembled leadership, their crystalline surface pulsing with patterns that suggested both excitement and deep concern. Our fundamental understanding of species development was wrong, Nix began, projecting a complex holographic model. We assumed technological advancement followed a linear path. We believed species had to master each level of technology before progressing to the next. The humans have proven this model obsolete. High Admiral Ixel's scales shifted to attention purple as Nix displayed side-by-side comparisons of human progress before and after the Valruchian arrival. In just one standard cycle, they've made technological leaps that should have taken centuries. But here's the crucial point. They're not following our development path at all. They're creating hybrid technologies that combine their primitive resources with advanced theoretical understanding. They're literally inventing new branches of science. Lieutenant Commander Vex's gelatinous form rippled with data patterns as they added to the presentation. Yesterday, we detected them testing what appears to be a gravity manipulation device. But instead of using quantum field generators like we do, they've developed a way to achieve similar results using room temperature superconductors and modified electromagnetic fields. It's less efficient than our technology, but it works, Nix finished. And more importantly, they can manufacture it with their current industrial capabilities. They're not trying to copy our technology. They're reinventing it from first principles using materials they can actually produce. The council chamber erupted in confused discussions. Elder Kyrix, whose ancient crystalline form had witnessed centuries of Valruchian expansion, raised a question that silenced the room. How are they acquiring the theoretical knowledge to achieve these advances? Nix's surface flickered with what could only be described as embarrassment. They're guessing. And then testing their guesses. Their scientific method seems chaotic to us, but it's incredibly effective. They propose multiple competing theories, test them simultaneously across thousands of locations, and rapidly iterate based on results. They're not afraid to be wrong. In fact, they seem to learn more from their failures than their successes. The holographic display shifted to show human internet traffic patterns. Look at this, Vex continued. When we first arrived, their scientific discussions were segregated by field. Physicists talked to physicists, chemists to chemists. Now their research networks are completely interconnected. They're combining insights from biology, physics, chemistry, even their primitive social sciences, in ways we never considered. But the most remarkable aspect, Nix added, their surface pulsing with intense patterns, is how they're distributing this knowledge. They're not just sharing research results, they're sharing failures, partial successes, and even wild speculation. Their entire species has become one vast, interconnected research and development network. High Admiral Ixel's scales shifted to decision white. You're suggesting we've been measuring the wrong things all along, that our classification system is fundamentally flawed. Exactly, Nix confirmed. We measured technological advancement by counting achievements. We should have been measuring adaptation potential. The humans aren't superior to us in any single area. They're not as strong as the Draconids, not as intelligent as the Morcath, not as technologically advanced as us. But they're good enough at everything to be dangerous, and they can improve at a rate we thought impossible. The display showed a new data set, human military installations worldwide. But they weren't preparing for war in any way the Valruchians recognized. Instead of building weapons, they were creating redundant communications networks. Instead of training soldiers, they were conducting massive civic response drills disguised as disaster preparation exercises. They're not preparing to fight us, Vex realized, their form rippling with comprehension. They're preparing to survive us. Every human on the planet is being subtly trained to function independently while maintaining collective coordination. They're making their entire civilization resistant to decapitation strikes or attempts at control. Nix's surface pulsed with urgent patterns. And here's the most crucial realization. We didn't cause this. We just accelerated it. Look at their historical records. They've been unconsciously preparing for this moment for generations through their fiction, their games, their constant imagination of future scenarios. We're not dealing with a suddenly advanced species. We're dealing with one that has been collectively rehearsing for this moment for centuries. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Their entire system of classifying and dealing with emerging civilizations was based on the assumption that technological progress followed predictable patterns. The humans weren't just advancing quickly, they were advancing differently, creating hybrid technologies and social structures that had no equivalent in Valrusian experience. High Admiral Ixel's scales shifted through a complex series of colors before settling on a new pattern, one that combined respect with concern. We need to completely restructure our approach. The question is no longer how to study them, but how to engage with them. They forced us to recognize them as equals not through superior strength or technology, but through sheer adaptability. There's something else, Nix added, their surface showing complex warning patterns. The humans have started launching what they call generation ships, slower than light vessels designed to support human life for centuries. They're already preparing to seed themselves among the stars, with or without faster-than-light technology. They're not waiting to be invited into the galactic community. They're preparing to create their own. The implications were staggering. The Valruxians had encountered a species that didn't just break their classification system, it rendered it meaningless. The humans weren't just advancing, they were evolving their entire approach to civilization in real time. And they were just getting started. Evolution's wild card. The grand archive of the eternal knowledge had never been opened to a full council session before. Yet here they were, the entire Valrugian leadership assembled among the ancient data crystals that held the accumulated wisdom of their civilization. Research Director Nix stood at the center, their crystalline surface radiating patterns that suggested both revelation and concern. "We've been asking the wrong question," Nix began, their voice resonating through the archive chamber. "We kept asking what makes humans dangerous. The real question is, what makes them different?" The holographic display activated, showing the evolutionary history of every known spacefaring species. Look at the pattern. Every other species, including us, evolved to fill a specific ecological niche. We optimized for specific advantages. The Draconids became stronger. The Morcath became smarter. We Valruxians developed our technological aptitude. High Admiral Ixel's scales shifted to curiosity blue. And the humans. The humans. Nix's surface pulsed with excitement. They never specialized at all. They remained adaptable generalists. Every time their environment pressured them to specialize, they developed tools instead of evolving. They're not the strongest, fastest, or smartest. They're just good enough at everything to survive anywhere. Lieutenant Commander Vex's gelatinous form rippled with new data patterns. "We've detected something remarkable in their global communications. They're not just sharing information anymore. They're actively creating new ways of thinking. Look at this." The display showed human social networks lighting up with unprecedented patterns. Communities worldwide were spontaneously organizing into problem-solving groups, tackling challenges that should have been centuries beyond their capability. "They're not just adapting their technology," Nix continued. "They're adapting their entire way of existence. When we arrived, they were divided into nation-states. Now they're simultaneously maintaining those structures while creating new, overlapping networks of cooperation that transcend traditional boundaries." Elder Kirix's ancient form shimmed with concern. "You're suggesting they're evolving in real time." "Not biologically," Nix clarified. "They're evolving culturally, technologically, and socially, all at once. They've turned their lack of specialization into their greatest strength. They can change their entire civilization's direction faster than most species can adapt to minor challenges." The display shifted to show human spacecraft designs. They weren't just building ships, they were preparing for every possible future simultaneously. Some vessels were designed for war, others for peace. Some carried weapons, others carried gardens. They were ready to be anything they needed to be. "Here's the real revelation," Nix announced, their surface pulsing with intensity. "We thought we were studying them, but they've been studying the universe all along. Every piece of fiction they wrote about aliens, every game they played about space exploration, every wild theory they entertained. It was all preparation, not consciously, but culturally. They'd been rehearsing first contact scenarios for generations through their imagination. High Admiral Ixel's scales shifted to understanding gold. They're not just a species. They're an evolutionary wild card. Exactly, Nix confirmed. And now they know they're not alone in the universe. They've activated potential they didn't even know they had. They're not adapting to us. They're adapting to the very concept of a broader cosmos. Our arrival wasn't a crisis for them. It was a catalyst. The archive chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. The humans weren't just another emerging species. They were something unprecedented. A civilization that had maintained its primitive adaptability while developing advanced capabilities. They hadn't specialized because they never needed to. They could become whatever they needed to be. The final data projection showed something that made even Elder Carix's ancient form pulse with astonishment. Humans had begun broadcasting a new message into space, not just to the Valruxians, but to the galaxy at large. It wasn't a plea for recognition or a declaration of power. It was an invitation to learn together. They're offering to share their adaptability. Nix explained, their surface showing patterns of wonder. They don't want to dominate or submit. They want to teach other species how to change as quickly as they do. They're offering to help us break free from our own evolutionary specializations. High Admiral Ixel's scales settled into a color never before seen in Valrugian history, a shade that somehow combined hope and trepidation. So, what do we do now? We accept, Nix answered simply, because they've shown us something profound. The true measure of a species isn't its current capabilities, but its capacity for change. The humans aren't extraordinary because of what they are. They're extraordinary because of what they could become, and what they could help us become. As the Council debated this unprecedented proposal, Earth continued its transformation. Humans weren't just preparing for their place among the stars. They were preparing to help reshape the very nature of galactic civilization. They had turned their greatest weakness, their lack of specialization, into an opportunity not just for themselves, but for all species. The universe would never be the same, and perhaps that was exactly what it needed. In the depths of space, the eternal knowledge began composing humanity's new classification. Species type, undefined. Potential, unlimited. The age of specialization was over. The age of adaptation had begun.